The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shane Jones. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the now 7th edition of Inquiries of Our Reality. I'm your host, Shane. Today, I have with me Garton from the InnerVerse podcast. How you doing today, man?
Hey, I'm doing really well. Excited to be here and talk about whatever we're going to get into. And nice to meet you, Shane.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, man. I've been listening to your stuff for a while, and it's really exciting to have you on today, especially this early in my podcasting episodes.
Yeah, so you said this is the 7th episode?
Yes, sir. Not including, of course, me popping onto other people's podcasts.
That's cool. My name actually numerologically equals 7 in gematria. I remember my 7th episode quite well, actually. You know, I couldn't go back and say what happened on most of those early shows by number, but that one in particular stands out in my recall. So kind of cool to be on episode 7. Lucky number 7.
Happened for a reason, man. Gotta be. The universe has its ways, man.
Oh, absolutely. Universe loves to play.
So I guess to get into everything, why don't you tell everybody about yourself for anybody that doesn't happen to know?
Yeah, so I'm a full-time podcaster. I have plenty of side passions. I would style myself as an artist of all trades, dabble in many things, maybe more of a generalist than a specialist, but I think that that's the way to go. Generalists are quite good at generating and connecting dots between different fields. So I like to do hardcore marker art doodles. I'm a sound healer as well. So I use tuning forks to balance people's auric field. You could call it sound balancing, aura technician, what have you. I'm also into tarot cards and I Ching and provide oracle services for people that want to come to me for some spiritual counseling or guidance, where they can reflect with the universe about what it is they think about things in their life. Get a little closer to their own authentic feelings that sometimes we hide from ourselves, especially about big stuff. So I do all those things. I'm also into, I already said I host InnerVerse, right? But I have a second show called Vibrant that is a live show on Wednesday nights, still on my same channel, but it's kind of a different feel because it's a video format and very community oriented. So I'd love to see some people come check that out at 8 p.m. on Wednesday nights, Central Time, 8 p.m. Central. We have a great time just seeing what comes up and taking questions from the audience. And yeah, so InnerVerse and Vibrant are the two main forms of content that I put out regularly. I have some other things I do less frequently than weekly, but yeah, that's the main stuff.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do with the tuning forks? I was hearing about that on your last podcast, like what exactly happens, what it does exactly.
Yeah. You know, it's a process that it's one of those things where you can know that it does work, but understanding why and how it works, it's going to be a long process for not just me, but like humanity to really understand and unlock deeper levels of what the connections are between sound and health and vibration and water, frequency and intention, all these things. But what a simple way to put it is that we have an aura, we have a biofield. You could even consider it to be like a electromagnetic plasma of sorts that is generated by all of our body, but in particular, very centered in the heart. And that, if you've heard of the Heart Math Institute, they've done a lot of research on the field that your heart projects around your body, right? So this field, or what you would call maybe the aura, I like the biofield as a terminology. I learned a lot of this from Eileen Day McCusick, who's a really amazing author and researcher, practitioner, discoverer of what she calls the biofield anatomy. And so this anatomy of our biofield, we can discuss that more or not, depending on where you want to go with this, but it is consistent for all human beings that different parts of the energy field emanating from our physical body have a consistent type of memory and information encoded in the same regions of this space, like this 6-foot bubble space off of our physical skin. So yeah, like when you learn that map and you get the chart and you start internalizing that information, it's really helpful. First of all, as a healing modality, it's wild that it works remotely, but it's really helpful as an individual, even if this isn't something you want to do as a practitioner, to start to realize that everything we ever have going on in our body, whether it's an illness, any form of dis-ease, an injury, they all have correlations to something on the emotional plane, on the spiritual plane. So everything that goes wonky with our body it's a psychosomatic thing. There's not just, soma meaning the body, psyche meaning soul or spirit. It's not just one side or the other. They're two sides of the same coin. They're always connected. And you can approach the rectification of a problem on one side by looking at it from the other side. And sometimes it's way easier to do it that way. Sometimes we don't know why we're stuck in a rut emotionally or depressed, but then getting the right kind of exercise or changing our diet solves that. Well, inversely, sometimes we maybe can't figure out why we have this nagging pain or this weird chronic condition in terms of a health problem, and approaching it from the energy medicine side can help us alleviate it that way. So I think that the reason why we have a mind, body, spirit trinity like we do is really because if we get stuck in any of those areas, we're able to progress by looking at it from one of the other parts of our trinary existence.
With that knowledge that you have, I actually weirdly enough got into this topic today. What's like your belief on like music, so to speak, with like frequencies? Because I've been hearing a lot about like the 808s being like a frequency that's supposed to like not necessarily be good for you. What's your belief on that kind of stuff?
I can't speak on 808, but I can say that a lot of, and it's probably not intentional all the time, but a lot of popular music, and much of it maybe is intentional, is not coded to a frequency that is helpful or healthy for our body. But rather than worry about that, I would rather just say that there are definitely frequencies that are helpful and conducive to our body and our health. And there are really simple ways to utilize those frequencies. And an example would be like today, I took a shower after I went running, and I wanted to work on solar plexus, constriction, and opening up breathing, and everything that has to do with that particular region. So I grabbed a tone that I know associates with that, 528 cycles per second, and played music that it was at that frequency average while I was in the shower. So you're cymatically programming the water of not just your body, but also that, you're taking the shower, it's hitting that water too. And yeah, I mean, maybe it feels like a subtle effect, but over time, all that type of work can really accumulate and be very healthy and helpful. So if that makes sense, like we're talking about, I actually learned today something really interesting that I maybe relearned it because I think I'd heard this before, but that our cellular biology responds to vibration and sound so dramatically that, how our cells have different receptors, the cell membrane can change shape so that when it encounters a particular nutrient or it's looking for a particular protein, the membrane changes shape so that its receptors are the right shape for that thing. Well, it turns out that there's very conclusive research evidence that sound and vibration can influence the shape of the receptors of our cellular body. So there's two types of medicine, therefore. You could influence the cellular behavior with something like penicillin, or you could influence it with sound and vibration and get the same result if you knew the right code in terms of frequency. And so I think this new science of light and sound is really us going back to the future in a sense, or returning to an information that ancestors at one point knew very well, and we've let go of it.
Is there a particular ancestry that this
this practice came from?
The whole world. I mean, I've also been really interested, especially this week, but it's interesting with research, right? That you look into a topic and you're like, oh, okay, I know about that, so I'm going to move on. But then eventually you circle back around to it, and in this sort of linear progression, because of all the other stuff that you've learned since then, now this other subject that you thought you knew enough about to be competent and comprehend, now you look at it again and you're like, oh, now it really clicks. So I've been, and there'll be continual linear progression and chronological improvement of my knowledge of all these things, but I've been really into the just this week in particular, the Antiquitech idea. Are you familiar with that concept?
Actually, no, myself, but I'd love to hear. And for all the listeners, I'm sure they'd like to have that concept explained also.
Yeah, it just depends on how far back we want to go in the cosmological revision of mainstream historical fake narratives. But Antiquitech is a terminology used by many different research communities, all revolving around things like the mud flood, advanced ancient civilizations, what they call Tartaria. Are you familiar with any of these concepts?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So it looks as if I've been trying to get it. Like, I knew that there was something to do with resonance technology going on with cathedrals, for example, and star force, but star forts, if you guys out there don't know about that, check it out. Look into star forts that exist all around the realm, from Africa to Australia, North America to, Europe, everywhere that there have been people, there are these star forts and this grid of incredible advanced architecture that when you really look at it and you're paying attention to what you're seeing and you consider, how would I build that if all I had at best was a horse and buggy cart? You'd realize you wouldn't build it. That's not what you would do. You wouldn't be able to, most likely. At the very least, you wouldn't be able to build it at the amount and scale that it has been built. So I've been trying to figure out, like, okay, so what is the point of this? It seems like the way that things were gridded, that there was a purpose behind it for etheric free energy technology. But the missing component for me that I wasn't quite grasping was that there was a lot more water involved, and that water was like the storage and transfer mechanism for this cymatic energy that was generated by these architectural marvels that were able to draw etheric energy, shape that energy through things like biogeometry, and biogeometry meaning like the right structural pattern, understanding cymatic patterns, and say, for example, like that Emoto research that shows how when you freeze water with a particular intention, you get these beautiful symmetrical snowflakes, and you get consistency. Like every time you project love or every time you project gratitude, you get different patterns, but it's similar. So understanding those cymatic patterns, applying them to the architecture, using sound as well with the bells and the organs, and the very fact that like water itself makes sound, and falling water in the right structure and the right pattern, that's a cymatic generator as well. So it's still not something I would say like I could go build a device that draws from the ether and generates energy into water and then I could use it. But I am starting to have a grasp of it, and in particular how that would be applied to like food production and just everybody's health being way better if the water was structured and living and energized with these etheric and sound-based technologies. So all of that can be applied on a micro scale with sound healing modalities. And you can pretty much like inundate yourself with, and maybe you ought to look into doing so, inundate yourself with coherent sound patterns, because everything from the sound a refrigerator makes in the background to the hum of an engine of our car, all these mechanical sounds that are based in our dirty energy technology, dirty electricity technology, those are stressors. And we're so constantly flooded with these sounds. And the reason they're stressors is because they're dissonant, because they don't have a coherent waveform structure, we find ourselves not even knowing why we're tense all the time and getting to the point where we're ignoring the tension that we have and that we hold all the time. So the more that we can bathe ourselves in any way, simple or more maybe masterful, with a knowledge of like your biofield anatomy, you don't need that necessarily to do helpful things for yourself. It's really interesting. I think everyone maybe in the future will learn about stuff like that, or most people will, because it's such a simple and elegant way to approach health. But on a simple level, sound healing, it should be like generally just a part of your energetic hygiene. And if energetic hygiene is a new phrase for you too, then welcome to the path of mysticism. And this is the most important part of it in general, is grounding and energetic hygiene. Just as important, probably more important than taking a physical shower and worrying about how you smell, although that's kind of part of it in a subtle way, is paying attention to your field, to your charge, because everything is electric and we are electric beings, and maintaining the proper balance in our charge and our energy field with energy hygiene, which we could talk about methods for, is so vital and so important, in particular if you're a seeker of truth, if you're trying to push towards and get closer to the origin and the source of all life. Well, that's a highly infinitely energetic point, monadic aspect of self and of universe. And the more energy that you add to your system, the closer you get to source, the more origin that you're drawing towards, the more important balance is, because you add energetics to something that's out of balance, and it's going to shake apart if it's not constructed well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. People that wanted to introduce this into their everyday life, what would be the start to this?
Yeah, I mean, there'd be a lot of ways you could. I would just get a tuning fork, actually. There's a couple of options with tuning forks. There's weighted tuning forks, and I really like the one called the Sonic Slider. This is invented by Eileen Day McCusick, the author I mentioned. Her books are also available at the same place, Biofield Tuning Store.com. I'm not affiliated with them, although I ought to be, because I think I've sent a shitload of people there. But you can get this Sonic Slider tuning fork. Last time I checked, it was like $75. It's a weighted tuning fork. So you actually strike it, and it's a really low frequency. It's the Schumann resonance times 12, 12th harmonic of the Schumann resonance. So, very aligned with the earth frequency that it puts off. If anyone's not heard of the Schumann resonance, that's the baseline frequency that the planet is constantly, it oscillates, it goes up and down, but that's an average that's been decided upon by people. And using this weighted tuning fork, you're actually pressing it to your body and directly transmitting the physical vibration, which is electricity. Vibration, electricity, light, they are all, and sound, they are all the same phenomenon at different levels of intensity of frequency, of oscillation. So something like a weighted tuning fork, as I'm describing, you're actually electrifying in a low voltage, coherent, not dirty electricity way. You're electrifying your cellular biology. And I had a bad rock climbing injury in my left shoulder before I even knew really what the biofield anatomy was about, what that pertained to in particular. And I couldn't really get over it. I kept taking a week, 2 weeks, a month off from climbing and working out, but I still couldn't lift my left hand above shoulder height without pain and resistance. And I definitely couldn't raise it all the way over my head. And I got this Sonic Slider tuning fork and started using it on that part of my shoulder. And I kid you not, within days, the pain got better in the first time I used it. But within a few days, I'd already recovered the range of motion from that injury. So it's it's hard to really make a promise over what it can and can't do. but I know that it can do good things. And it's a lot cheaper than going to a doctor. It's a lot cheaper than most of the ways that treatment is applied. And once you have the fork, you have it forever. I mean, extreme extended use of tuning forks might wear them out. If you're like a practitioner and doing this daily for people and just striking them over and over again, yeah, you can wear those out. But for personal, regular use, nah, you won't wear it out. And in fact, that sonic slider for ladies out there, I guess guys too, it is marketed as a cosmetic tool. And I think that's just to like get more normies to look at it. But there is a particular effect of adding this energy, this coherent vibration to your body, to your face in particular, that can help your face sort of pick itself back up. And what I mean by that is that when our energy fields are out of whack, when we have a lot of like sort of Swiss cheese holes in our auric membrane from allowing energetic vampirism, parasitic entities, either unconsciously most likely, to feed on us, and then we're feeding them in return, and we have this dynamic of leaking our own life force energy. You notice that like people, as they age, if they're not really healthy and in tune with life and with their purpose and all that, and have good boundaries, they'll start to look like their face is melting. Their ears will start to like sag down. And I hope anyone out there listening, and that's if you're looking at sometimes I say stuff like this and I'm kind of like, I kind of laugh about it, but I'm not trying to freak someone out who is now looking at their ears or their nose and like, oh no, I'm starting to look like a Sith Lord over here. Just know that this is a reversible process, but that human beings are not supposed to get uglier as they age. But the face that we develop over the course of our life is sort of what we deserve on an energetic level. So I'm not trying to say that to be harsh. I'm just saying that like it's reversible, but you ought to look into, this type of energetic hygiene, this type of strengthening your boundaries, of improving the auric membrane, of cutting yourself free from, metaphorically cutting yourself free from the self-parasitism of psychic vampirism and of psychic vampirism from external sources. And modalities like sound are really good for that, because they can repair the issues in the aura that need repaired, because all of us have taken some shots, taken some damage. Now it's going to be our mindset, it's going to be our behaviors that are most relevant to whether or not we heal going forward. It's never too late to heal, or if we melt, our face melts. But what that is, like, if you're noticing yourself getting saggier, so to speak, it is because energetically on the field level, you're leaking light, leaking life force energy. And the whole point of the whole foundation and groundwork of health, in my opinion, and vitality and vibrancy, is that we recognize ourselves as a vessel for life force energy, and that we become the most pristine and intact vessel we can, without holes in it. Because if we've got holes in our vessel of any kind, doesn't matter how much gas you pour in, metaphorically, or how much goodness you put in, it's coming out the bottom. You're only going to be able to fill it up to a certain height where the holes are. So all of this metaphorically applies to our chakra system, and getting more knowledge about that. This is really kind of like a disjointed presentation about it in terms of how I'm talking about it, and I'm just discussing and bouncing around from things as they pop into my mind. But I have done more methodical presentations on this. But really, go check out the books by Eileen or other practitioners like Sol Luckman. But I really just recommend Eileen's first book, Tuning the Human Biofield is what it's called. You can get it on Audible, on Amazon, Kindle, or from the Biofield tuning store. But you could also pick up from other places. You don't have to buy from that store regular tuning forks or singing bowls, things like that. Whatever creates a coherent sound, or if you don't have the money for that, I'm not completely against the idea of going to a YouTube channel that purports to be putting off these type of positive, coherent sound patterns. You can start anywhere, but recognizing that we maybe need to combat the deluge of dissonance that we're surrounded by through the technology and through our chosen separation from nature. I mean, again, nature's free. So going out and doing what the Japanese call forest bathing, going in the evening and hearing the cicadas and the crickets or the birds chirping in the morning in your backyard or whatever, all of that is coherent as can be. So, it's about finding ways to rectify your charge imbalance, grounding, barefoot walks, touching a tree, meditation, getting adequate rest. A lot of the things that influence your electricity and get your charge right are obvious things. But again, like I said, you can pour as much water into a cup as you want. And if there's a hole in it, the water kind of leaks out. So there's also the necessity to practice the energetic hygiene maneuvers, maybe look into energy healing from a professional of some kind to look for and help you address wherever these holes in your aura might be. Because a lot of us develop them and it's unknowing whether it came from hard relationship problems, like really vampiric people in our life that we let in and fed that light from ourselves and let them puncture us. Or maybe it came from, maybe we got the cowpoke because we're afraid we're going to lose our job. And now we are like regretting it and have learned how that's affected us. That is another example of something that energy medicine could help you with, because it helps your body do what it needs to do by improving its overall energy level. Body isn't going to make an attempt to heal something unless it knows it has the energy to complete the throughput of that process. So there's those examples, and other ways that you might have suffered damage to your energy field that all of us often do is just the general wear and tear of living not in alignment with our purpose for some period of time in our life. And very few people are spiritually powerful enough to just begin life and go through the whole thing acting out in accordance and alignment with their purpose. So the last example would be drug use, any kind of addictive drug use or overuse of things like psychedelics or psychoactives like cannabis. That also puts holes in your energy field. Not saying never use, but it is what it is. It does do that.
What's if you were going to be a user of like psychedelics and like cannabis and stuff like that, what would be like your window of how often it should be used as far as like not to hurt your frequency and aura?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would say the answer would be that if you were using those modalities in a ceremonial way, in conjunction with things that are improving your auric health, your energy body health, your electric health, then you're going to know what is and isn't too much. But really, like, here's how I look at it. Okay. Especially like cannabis would be the example. It's kind of like that first time that it's so awesome, or maybe second time. They say sometimes people don't get high the first time they smoke cannabis, but that dragon that everybody's chasing, that really great experience that leads to habitual use. And the habitual use is never as good as that original first couple of times, unless you take a long break. I'm not saying this is literal, but this is the sense I get from working in people's energy fields and my own past use with cannabis, is that when you use it, it is like popping the cork on a wine bottle. And a lot of energy is now like going out your third eye, so to speak, as you open up from the use of this substance. I mean, It's not just third eye. Psychedelics open up all your chakras. So, and they themselves have a lot of energy and are high frequency, but that those holes need time to then like close back up and heal and seal. If you keep repeatedly doing it, you're just leaving yourself open, if that makes sense. And so you're no longer going to fill up and charge again. But if you take time between use, then you will have a bigger experience each time because you've let yourself sort of fill back up before then a release. Think of it like the cycle of the moon, you know, it doesn't stay full all the time. So that's kind of my best answer. I would never really deign to give more specific advice than that, but that, you know, anyone out there, you know, if you're overdoing it, and we all go through like experimental cycles and things. It's just like you may look back on some point in your life where you were a heavy user of psychedelics and realize, oh yeah, that does sound kind of like what was happening. But when you open yourself up like that, that's also where you run into the potential for hitchhikers, energetically, attachments, things like that. And it may not happen for a long time, and then it happens. You know, different. Don't gauge your ability to do X or Y or Z based on what you see other people apparently doing successfully, because you don't know what's going on in their internal world, no matter how well they seemingly are keeping it together externally. You need to base it off of your own intuition and what, you know, give yourself time to integrate. That's what I would say about psychedelics. I would I've had psychedelic experiences years ago that I feel like I'm still integrating right now, still learning more about what it meant and what happened.
I mean, as far as psychedelics, I mean, I've personally always seen them as a tool, so I definitely agree with you on that kind of stuff. As far as like cannabis goes,
I would even say, you know, it's not that you can't ever use it with the intent of having fun, but just realize it's going to be a spiritual ride too, and be open and intending for that. And then, like I said, energy hygiene while you're at it. I'm not saying that there's like no room for fun. I don't want to be that guy either, but you know, we just got to be real about the power of this stuff too.
I mean, you see how fast it happens too, that you can't take it 2 days in a row because it won't be nearly as strong. So especially with that, there's a huge tolerance that you develop just using it once. As far as like cannabis goes, do you think that this plays a role in why people don't usually dream if they smoke regular cannabis?
I mean, could be. I mean, as far as I understand, there's a melatonin mechanism at work with cannabis use that it kind of that makes sense too, because melatonin is that thing that gives your body the signal that it's time to sleep and thus dream. And then I think with cannabis use, you sort of go into a state of, you know, sleepwalking. I guess that's a good way of metaphorically putting it. You are kind of dreaming while awake. You're blending the worlds a little bit, maybe.
So it would kind of make it harder to dream in the actual time to dream, because you never fully get into that full dream state because you're kind of sitting in it on a regular basis.
Yeah, you're using up the reserves of the neurotransmitters. That this is the physical explanation anyway, that you're using up the reserves of the neurotransmitters that lead you to dream. Now, energetically, explanation might be more like that so you're opening up holes in your arc field through habitual use, right? In particular, solar plexus is the energy center of our chakras that relates to will. And it's also this golden yellow color. It's like the light inside of us is really situated there. Like the root is the fire. The sacral isn't, you know, also kind of in between fire and light, but it's more like the arousal. So you have the fire and then like the arousal energy, creative force. And then you get up to this golden solar plexus. Solar, it's light, you know, it's sunlight. And this is actually why, in my opinion, that if you eat honey, raw, organic, spoonfuls of honey before you go to sleep, you'll have stronger dreams, because it's also this golden color. It's a solar plexus medicine. It's actually where the phrase
stand
Sweet
behind that
dreams
one
comes
too,
from.
because I
You
usually
what?
don't remember my dreams. But when I have honey, weirdly enough, I do remember my dreams. So I stand behind that one too.
Yeah, that's where the phrase sweet dreams comes from, is taking a spoonful of honey before sleep. So this part of our energy body is our inner light reservoir, capacitor, if you will. And it relates to will. So interesting how that fits into like whether or not you have the willpower to be disciplined or resist addictive or abusive behaviors with substances, for example. So you have this holy energy field, this problem with will, possibly. There's different situations. Maybe you got a medicinal reason why you need to use it really regularly, but like a cancer patient or something. But that's not going to be a permanent forever deal. Theoretically, you wouldn't want it to be. And there are phases of life where it just they're like, I think that they're the phase of my life when I first started using cannabis. I really did medicinally need it like all the time. I needed to be more open as a sort of pendulum swing balance to how closed I had been through indoctrination and college and all that. So anyway, having a more intact energy body, especially around the solar plexus, means you're holding more of your inner light, your selfhood light, your consciousness light. And so going into dream realm, into astral, it's like bringing a lantern with you, but that lantern is also your ability to pay attention. It's both. So it's not just casting a light on things, it's also your currency with which you are able to pay attention. So there's that. And if you don't have that going into dream realm in a strengthened way, or just at least a normal, healthy, balanced way, makes perfect sense to me that you wouldn't have a lot of dream recall. You might still be having the dreams, but it's like sand slipping through open fingers versus having your hands cupped and can hold it. So again, everything when we talk about our energetic body or even our physical body, how they work together is like a vessel, and the integrity of that vessel is going to dictate how well one aspect of your self works versus it doesn't work well.
So, considering that I'm sure there's a lot of people that smoke cannabis that listen to these types of podcasts, do you have any personal recommendations that people could do to kind of counterbalance with cannabis use to, kind of help them out a little bit if they don't really have a choice, like if they're using it for medical reasons or things like that?
Yeah. I mean, back to the energy hygiene thing, applying sound, and if you want to get back into dreams more powerfully, okay, because our energy body can actually change and adapt really fast. It's not like you get these holes in your field and they're like scars or something. It's way more connected to mindset and, your electrical balance of your psyche, which means that if you say like you really want to use it every day, that's cool. I'm definitely hoping that I don't sound like I'm some guy that's like trashing, potheads.
No, I'm just asking.
I'm definitely not.
Not.
I use it myself from time to time and used to be a daily habitual like morning, noon, and night guy. It's like George Carlin says, I think these things suggest their own disuse at a certain point. And when you get that message, listen to that. And if that's not the message you're getting right now from inside, then, just keep doing what you're doing if that feels right. But if you were to want to get your dreams back, for example, at the very least, just try not going to bed having recently smoked. If you're going to go to bed at 11, 10 p.m., maybe cut off the cannabis by 6, something like that, so that you're not going to bed really in the thick haze of being stoned. You'll probably get some dreams back, for example. But I would also like, throw in maybe some supplements in terms of pre-bed, like honey, maybe even occasionally taking a melatonin source. Other neurotransmitter nootropics like acetylcholine can be really good for improving the state of your dream world. And dream work is really helpful for getting messages from yourself. So, but generally, no matter what you're cannabis user or not, the whole goal that I guess I have so far with what we've talked about is to encourage energetic hygiene. So that would be like maybe burning some sage and holding and moving that around your energy field. Definitely hitting the palm chakras and under the arms and, under the feet, going outside barefoot for 15, 20, 30 minutes a day, minimum a few minutes, because that's helping you ground electrically to the earth, discharge excess ions, and earth actually is able to, your body using earth is able to rebalance the charge differential and potential of your electrical field big time. Other things that help improve your electricity: singing loud, singing and toning with your voice, really helpful. I mean, everything that tuning forks can do for us as a tool or sound bowls, we could do with our voice. And, the external tool has its benefits because there's sort of like an objectification of you and the tool, but your voice can be that tool as well. Eating correctly, this is obvious stuff. Getting the right type of water that is structured living water, preferentially, but at the very bare minimum, not, city tap water, something that it can at least attest to not having the fluoride and chlorine, and apparently, according to everybody now, is snake venom now. What the fuck?
There's got to
I
keep
don't know
coming
if I
up with other
believe all
stuff.
that. I mean, it sounds very much like the type of symbolic story we'd get from the ophiolatry cult, just because they like to do all that mockery of us through their symbolism, but who knows? Anyway, a lot of ways to improve your voltage. Most of them just revolve around health, but yeah, energy hygiene, massively important. I like selenite crystal for that too. It's sort of like sage smoke, but in the form of a crystal. You can clear your field with that as well. Sunlight is a great purification. Even standing around a bonfire can have that effect to a degree. Fire is a purifying element too. So there's a lot of ways, but what's important is that you're doing something regular with the intention of grounding and clearing and balancing your energy field in one modality or another. And that's really like, you should look at that like as part of your schedule, the way that bathing is.
So, considering your background, how would you explain this reality that we live in? As far as like how would you explain our existence? What's your belief on it?
Oh man, big question. What is life?
I seem to ask everybody this. It seems to be the common question because I always want to ask for myself. So I'm always curious with everybody's different backgrounds, what their belief.
I love asking people that very same thing too. So I definitely don't blame you. The simplest answer I can give about the meaning of life, I think the meaning of life is life. Like just like that. But what we're doing here, what it is, those are fun questions to ask. And I think that maybe even the point, I've heard it said that there's 144 perspectives on truth. Truth has 144 sides. Kind of like there's only, say, a few hundred people that you can know and understand your relationship to at a single time before you're overloaded and you have to start like deleting people out of your mind.
Very true.
We all carry a different angle on it, but I do think that there's an objective reality, and that our senses feel like a bunch of different things are going on, but really all is a fractal reflection of the same all. That this pattern of toroidal energy self-generating in a loop is the basis of what reality and life is, and that we are vessels and toroidal field generators in miniature that are literally the image of the cosmos and the universe, and to some degree, at least energetic structure wise. So when I say the meaning of life is life, I think quite literally that there is no beginning or end, because existence, which is what we're a part of, there's nothing that can nullify it. If you were to take the pleroma, I talked about this with Juan from one-on-one on a recent podcast episode. But if you were to consider the pleroma, which is the all that is, and it's everything in combination with its opposite. So while it's the all, but it's also kind of the void, because things negate and cancel out. But existence cannot be canceled out by non-existence, because non-existence doesn't exist. So I don't believe in the beginning. I appreciate some of the aspects of those type of stories and cosmologies and scriptures for the allegory and metaphor that is available there. But I don't really think there's an in the beginning, as in there was some point where there was nothing and then nothing became something. To me, that just doesn't compute. It's a lot simpler, more elegant to consider that we're infinite, and so we've always been, and that we're maybe in a type of spiral loop, returning to our own past, which is actually our future, and going on a ride of remembering and forgetting, expanding out, spiraling out, in breath, coming back in the forgetting. And that right now is an exciting time because, and I think maybe like different beings can be on a different oscillatory pattern. Like some people are on the remembering wave and some people are on the forgetting wave in terms of where their soul's at or where they're spiritually at. But I think now is an exciting time because it looks to me like we're on the precipice of a massive push towards remembering who and what we are, our place in the cosmos, our connection to this source energy, or this mother Taurus, this mother toroidal field. I mean, even Taurus as an astrological sign, the bull is associated with the mother or Venus or the goddess energy. So I do think that our origin is this self-generating, self-perpetuating cosmic loop of life, creating life ad infinitum. And it's, like I said, ad infinitum. So there's no end to that. And that's exciting. I mean, wouldn't it be better to exist than to not exist? So many of these weird ascension cults and covertly nihilistic new age spiritual paths, and I mean, materialism is nihilist as fuck outside of the new age. Sure. Pop culture, Gnosticism, so many like simulation theory, all these different things. They're all like pushing this idea of escaping from what they call the illusion or the samsara. But I'm sorry, there's nowhere that you can go where you get away from yourself. So there's no escaping from ego per se, or like you can improve the health and quality and balance of your ego. There's no getting away from who you are, which is this infinite toroidal energy field. And why would you really want to when it comes down to it? It makes more sense to try to understand it, understand self, and then maybe become a conscious observer, conscious witness of that self. Because when you look at so many processes of our body, I was really kicking around this idea of, do we have free will? Is there no free will? Is this a lucid dream I'm having called life and reality? Or is the image making faculty of consciousness and the, whatever God is, just giving me the experience of thinking I have free will, but really I'm still just continually along for the ride of life, witnessing a predetermined or something outside of my control. And I realized that it's both, man, that how many functions in our body have an autonomic aspect and an aspect of it can be controlled, right? You can breathe on purpose, or your body will keep doing it for you. So you have free will and you have the deterministic life goes on outcome. So I think the real sweet spot, the real power of life is to take the witness perspective on purpose, apply your free will towards paying as much attention as you can to yourself internally and outside, and seeing that the inner outer, the outward doth from the inward roll, and the inward lies the inmost soul, in an alchemical sense, that the more attention that we can spend, the more we'll see that our thoughts, behaviors, and actions really do generate and manifest our reality. Like that toroidal shape, it's coming out of us, going away from us, and then we see it on the other side of the torus as our reflection, which is external world, and then it comes back to us, the energy that we put out. And that's just going to keep on happening, baby. And so might as well learn to take responsibility for the process, so that instead of receiving constant attacks and kicks in the balls from our own shadow that we reject and refuse to look at, but is still going to be there and come at us in new and different ways, as long as we try to push it away and separate ourselves from it, it will be a separate entity and enemy at that point. And that's what demonic means. Daemon or demon is a divided mind or divided man. Instead, we could take the approach of that reflection on the other side of the wall of the toroidal field is our art project. And it's a masterpiece. That life is our ongoing art project. And then it becomes a lot more fun, because, to be an artist, you have to be decisive. And then free will actually begins to be a thing. And you realize that getting closer to source, getting closer to your origin, knowing who you are, recognizing that self permeates all of existence and that all selves are the same I am energy of this original toroidal generator, you get to make it up as you go along, rather than feel like you're playing by somebody else's rules that you don't like. That's the beauty of authentic spiritual path, and why creativity is essential to one's creative or spiritual path. I think that's really the only authentic spiritual path, is one that involves you tapping into the creative force within yourself and expressing it. Because without that aspect, you're really not touching source or God at all. If something's the source, if something's the origin, or it's original, then it's imaginative. It's making up what it's doing. And people are afraid of that. They get this idea of being an imposter and imposter syndrome and all that. Like, a lot of what I do with energy healing, I'm making it up on the spot as I go. That doesn't mean it's fake. That actually makes it authentic in a weird paradoxical way. But where the fakeness feeling happens is when we're out of balance, we're out of alignment in some other aspect of our life, or if we're lying to ourselves about some part of our life, we're doing self-harm, therefore, through the being dishonest to ourselves. That's the area where then when we go to try to make it up as we go, it comes out wrong. And so why I say spirituality, the spiritual path, creativity is integral to our development and all that, is because anyone that's tried to get really good at something has realized that they got to get their own bullshit out of the way to progress past a certain point, that there will be continual plateaus you reach until you're like, all right, I guess I need to exercise more or something so that my brain's not as foggy. Or I guess I need to, athletically, if the thing you're trying to get good at is athletics, then it's obvious you need to take care of your body. But for me, think about like I used to vape a long time ago, and I'd be trying to draw and do my marker stuff, and then I continually stop and put down the tools and then like hit the vape. And I realized, like, man, how much extra time and how much distraction is being layered onto this process, and how is it influencing the process that I have this other thing that I need to continually do. So like I said, in every way, shape, and form imaginable, your energetic hygiene and your physical health are an integral aspect to your ability to improve your whatever it is, the pursuit of that your soul is called to do. And whether it's creating your body, bodybuilding, athletics, or creating something in the external world, could be a podcast, could be a painting, whatever, to improve your ability to bring forth something original, you must also improve yourself. And that's a never-ending set of stairs. It's infinite stairs, or infinite chutes and ladders. Go up or go down. forever, either direction. So, we got to wake up to that and realize that the best way to be in touch with God or with the great mystery or the supreme being is to learn how to express our imagination decisively, because that's exactly what supreme being is doing at every moment. That gives us this shared consensus dream reality.
So, I mean, just some food for thought. So, if there's a path that everybody's intended to take, but there's also the concept of free will, do you believe that some people have a predetermined path, which would be like the non-creative type people, that it's already been set in front of them, versus almost the path of a creative type person would be to be able to make their own choices, but in a weird way, it's already kind of a predetermined path for them within
So
that
I
path.
try not to hold beliefs that I don't have some kind of evidence for, but this may be an exception. To me, a way of reconciling what you're describing with how everything else seems to work, in the sense that spirit seems to be a free will thing, that free will does seem to exist. Like I said, because we have this example of our bodies and how our bodies can work automatically or consciously. And maybe you could look at that as fate and destiny. Like your fate is the automatic, but your destiny is where you're choosing it, right?
Mm.
So if we can see that pattern in life and in ourselves, then it stands to reason that maybe before some of the things that happen to us that feel like that fate shit or feel predetermined, maybe some of that stuff we intended or agreed to before we came in. So if you look at your life like an art project, think about a painting as an example, a really big ass painting, huge mural. You don't know exactly how it's going to look before you start. You don't know exactly how it's going to turn out when you're in the middle of it. And from that point at the beginning, you definitely don't know what every step is going to be between beginning and end, but you maybe have an idea going in. I think that life could be that way, that before, we shoot down into a vagina and pop out of that portal into this dimension, maybe there's a point where we're like, okay, this time around, I think I'm going to go for this type of a project, right? And so maybe there's like a hard mode or easy mode involved, like that I'm going to be born to crackheads, or easy life. I'm going to have really good parents, whatever. I think that there's got to be some element of choice involved at that level, because choice seems to be what source is all about. And if we are expressions of source, if we are carriers of source, then at some level we are the source, and thus we made the choice. And that doesn't, that's like really squishy in terms of an explanation, because you're like, wow, so I should just go tell some girl that got raped that she chose that. I don't think you should. But there may be a point of her life where she realizes how all that bad led her to something good, or was something she wouldn't change because she's appreciative of the life she has later. And we all have to make that, we all have to choose our beliefs in that sense. Like, is life happening to me, or am I happening to life? Doesn't the outer world dictate what my inner world is like, or does my inner world influence the outer world? And for me, I choose the latter belief.
I've always kind of seen it as the best way to describe it is I feel like there's predetermined events that are intended to happen, but it's almost like looking at a math problem that you can do three different ways to create the same number in the end, but that freedom of choice happens within the math problem, but it'll all result in the same end result, and that's the predetermined part. That's been kind of my view on it personally.
I like that. Yeah, that works for me.
You can put multiple pieces together to build into it. So another weird thing that I've been thinking about lately too is what's your belief as far as like Anunnaki playing a part as far as like in our development as people?
Yeah, so I think that as source, as the monad, as the one pleromic field subdivides itself through its sort of own imaginarily imposed boundaries. Again, this is all just like wild, high octane speculation. Again, this is not really beliefs, but it's like it could be, maybe, that the reason why we have this mythology of pantheons of gods that influenced and created human beings to serve them might be because we exist on a spectrum of harmonic octaves. And we've chosen at this current point in history to, or we've incarnated into a particular version of society where our consciousness is really just like localized in only one layer of the octave spectrum. And that higher octaves, to use that problematic term, higher and lower, less divided octaves, you could say, closer to the pleroma, maybe. You know, like the original division would be the yin and the yang, but they're perfect mirror reflections of each other in a way. They fit each other. So that's almost not exactly even beings in a sense. But further divisions, maybe you get like 7 gods, and then maybe you get like 12 gods, or an ennead of 9. I think that what I'm trying to say here is that those divisions of the original source, before you eventually step down to the level of there being 8 billion divisions of source, right? At a certain octave of reality. You know, think about like a wheel. Think about a circle. You could divide a circle into 2. You could divide it into 2 billion if you had thin enough lines, right? So that's kind of how I see these ideas of the gods. That if you were to say divide that circle into 7, then all of the beings that are part of the 8 billion division would fit under the like jurisdiction or within the pie wedge of one of those 7. Maybe you can look at astrology as kind of a system like that, but infinitely more complex than the description I'm giving, because we're talking about the infinite here. Does this make sense? So at that level of the octave of life or reality, there's beings that are way more maybe aware of who and what they are, way more powerful because they are containing more of the life force energy of the totality of nature. And like any other part of nature, they create, you know, they create things. They give birth to children and creations of a sense. Then that's kind of like their mitosis action. So you would have to look at beings like that as gods relative to our level of the octave spectrum. But for me, reconciling aspect of this way of looking at it is that they're also us, or we're them. So
that's what I was
same way
ask.
that, you're same way that you're a continuation and extension of your mom and dad. We're like that to these gods. So to me, they're not boogeymen. They're not slave masters. They're at the very minimum more like ancestors.
I mean, this is my personal view on it. I believe that we are all part of somewhat of the same consciousness. So I think that they were like you were saying, like ancestors or like predecessors to what we are now. But like how we would create AI, they would see us almost as like a god, but there's still something above us. I think that there's this concept of like the Anunnaki may have helped to create us. It might be that possible missing link, but there's still something above them. So then it kind of jumps into, I believe that the meaning of life is experience. So is it just like this continuous cycle of there was a thing before them, that experience wasn't the experience they were here for, so then they made this other race, and that's where the Anunnaki comes in. That experience, they lived out the full experience in that. So then now they go into people and they're living that experience, and then it might progress into something else. And that's been the kind of concept that I've been working into lately that I've been really curious about. But like, what's your kind of view on that?
I like that. And then another way of maybe reconciling how there seems to be like, the world's in a bad bad way in so many aspects, then what you can look at it like this is my example. Big companies, really big corporations, they have delicate, massive data infrastructure, right? And they're very concerned that a hacker could come in and crash their system or steal their data or whatnot. And so these large scale corporations will actually put out a bounty on their own system and say they will invite the hackers in, where instead of possibly the risk of a hacker coming in anyway and wrecking stuff or stealing from them, they'll offer a reward. Hey, if you can show us how to hack our system, we'll just go ahead and pay you. That way you're not doing anything illegal.
Then
I kind of look at the bad actors of the world and the bugs in the system of life as it is right now in society, kind of like that. Because once I think source or the creative aspect of, universe and maybe even this octave that we call the gods, I think they do the same thing. I think that's why some people incarnate as the bad people, the psychopaths and all that. They're like the debuggers. They think they're badass hackers. And there maybe even is some, in a weird way, reward for them for doing that. Because, it is a hard job probably to be a shithead psychopath. It probably doesn't feel good most of the time. Maybe. I don't know.
It's like playing on hard mode, kind of like you were saying. It's almost like a concept like, have you seen that episode of Rick and Morty where they go into the virtual reality simulator and he thinks he lives like a full life in that short period? Yeah, I feel like it's almost kind of like that. They just keep throwing in for another ride, but not in a virtual reality sense, but in like a consciousness coming into a vessel kind of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, then that entire idea to reconcile all the evidence people seem to hold for simulation theory, ask yourself, is it possible that it's a spiritual simulation and doesn't have to be technological in the sense? But you know what technology means? Etymologically, it means art. So a technological simulation is artistic simulation, meaning, you can look at it either way. You can look at it like, oh, I'm trapped in a simulation. I'm a slave to the demiurge, whatever. Or you can look at it like, I'm simulating this experience of life as I'm experiencing it right now as an artistic technology of self-expression at this level of division, because it allows for a higher level of complexity for playing on hard mode, like you said. And, I've played this game a bunch of times on easier levels. I want it to be harder. I want it to take even more magic and synchronicity for me to break out of the sleep of the illusion of separation and remember who I am in this body. And every time you remember who you are, the harder it was to get there, the more powerful you seem to become as a light to the rest of the world. I think it is like if I looked at it like a simulation, I would be saying like a game, not like a prison.
Yeah, I feel like we'd be in the tutorial aspect still. We're trying to figure out how to use our abilities, and we haven't made it past that. And that's why we keep living in this continuous cycle where it seems like we used to be at a point where we understood these concepts, and then we strayed away from nature as we moved to cities, stuff like that, started losing abilities for things such as, being able to tell when it's going to rain. Every animal in the world can tell when it's going to rain before it rains, except for humans, because we pushed ourselves so far away from that. And it's like we got to keep continuously living this cycle because we can't get past the tutorial mode to actually get into the real game of what we're actually capable of.
Yeah, remember that what I said about your cells, actually their cell membranes altering the shape of their receptors based on vibration and energy and sound? That is a mechanism for explaining intuition on the physical materialist level, including things like knowing when it's going to rain. So we have all the powers, and every single fiber of our being has the ability to innately know what's up and what's happening around us. Our DNA is literally putting off light and seeing light. Our DNA has photon receptors in it, and like at a very low level puts off light. So we're luminous beings in a luminescent ether. Everything we do is seen by every part of ourself and every part of nature. There's no real privacy in that sense, but there is the concept of privacy legally, which is important. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I think life is awesome. I think that you're right that it feels like the tutorial mode still, and maybe it will always feel that way because there's infinite things to know, but only so much time in a life. But as more of us actually push and pursue towards knowing where we are and who we are, I look at the whole process like neural pathways are almost like a mining tunnel. Mind and mind even sound alike. I've witnessed this in a few different elements of skills and behaviors of people that, okay, so the example I always use, I'll just use it again for lack of being able to think of another one off the top of my head, although I'm sure there are plenty of examples like this. I go to a lot of music festivals, and when I first started going, I noticed there were a few girls that were like pretty good at hula hooping, right? They were pretty good. And they were kind of fewer and far between. And then as a few years progressed, and it happened quick, all of a sudden, like every other girl had a hula hoop. And the shit that they were able to do was far beyond what for a few years ago, the few hula hooping girls could do. And then it came to the point where like a friend of mine who was new to the scene would get a hula hoop, and within a few weeks, she was doing some of the hardest tricks that were not even doable or thought of by the original girls I saw hula hooping years back. So it's kind of like that idea that 100 years ago, running I don't know if a 4-minute mile is possible, but running a 4-minute mile was impossible. And now there's like people running 4-minute miles. These skills, these things we learn, including learning about who we are and our ability to express and articulate that and share it with each other. It's like these neural pathways of skills and knowledge that carve out in our brain, literally in the physical matter, are like tunnels in a mine. And so whenever you decide to go down a particular rabbit hole, one of these neural pathway tunnels, you kind of just get to walk, or maybe if you're really motivated, take a jog through this tunnel until you hit the wall where everybody is at. And this is the current level. And we're all going to start chipping away at this wall together. So, you can go deeper, further, and faster in any subject, the further, deeper that other people have already taken it. So I look at that as a really exciting, because it means that everything we're doing right now matters immensely to the larger fractal of life, the universe, and everything. These conversations matter immensely. Our ability to tap in, to get into these flow states, to express the deeper meanings of life, or recognize the meaning of life being its own self-generating existence is its own meaning. That means that more people will be able to get to that wall of the neural pathway tunnel that much quicker because of every chip that we take out of it with our pickaxe of deep thinking.
I also feel like it's a generational thing where it's not something that's going to happen this generation like everybody hopes it will be. It'll be something that you pass on to further generations, and they're going to further progress taking down this wall. Everybody expects it to be now, but it's not going to be something like that. It's going to take a long time to get to that point. And I feel like I was saying, we're there at one point and we strayed away, but we got to keep on that tried true path to keep working towards what we're doing here, and hope that people don't lose track from the view of it. Going off on a little side note here, I have some personal experiences I'd like to share with you, but as far as like auras go, do you believe in the concept of colored auras representing a personality? And if that is the case, from my personal views, I feel like it's not, again, something that people are expecting to see like a color around somebody to understand that, but I feel like it's more of like a feeling of a color, if that makes any kind of sense, that you get from like this in tune that you get from somebody else, where it's another primal feeling that we lost along the way that we had the ability to have at one point. And there's still some people that have that ability to sense people's auras and kind of get like an accurate representation of their personality from that aura. But what's your view as far as like the colored aura concept goes?
I actually recently had my aura photographed by a radionics machine. And the people who did it, like I put my hands on this, like these plates that were electric sensors, and the machine, then they took my picture, and the software translated the electrical impulses and the frequency of my body's electricity into a picture of color around my body and of each chakra. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. Turned out my aura was almost all on one side, like on all the chakras except a couple. I'd have to go pull out the picture. It was mostly this like deep crimson, and then there was some orangish and lighter red in some parts. And on one half of my field, it was this deep red, and the other half was like this gold, kind of tinged with streaks of green. And I was like, neat, red is a great color. I'm cool with that. And then this old hippie lady looked at the photo, and she just started telling me all the stuff that the colors in the different parts of the aura meant. And it was like getting an astrology reading. She was telling me all these things about my personality and my life path that were 100% accurate and specific. So, you know, there's clearly something to it in that respect. I don't know if those colors change over your life, or if different ways of seeing auras would have different results in terms of what kind of colors you're seeing and when. I can't really attest to all that. All I know is that a badass radionics machine from the 80s was able to predict my personality based on my electricity. I liked that a lot. Now, I look at this whole concept of like whether or not we can see them as having to do with what I think is humanity's loss of synesthesia. So synesthesia is where you see things with more than one sensory apparatus at once. Like, you know, the color blue, or the number 5 will be blue, or, you know, the note G will taste like citrus. I don't know if those examples are correct because I don't have synesthesia. I think the reason...
Would a good example of that be like, this sounds kind of weird and a weird way to interpret it, but like when I remember people, I always remember them with a color. And when I look into those colors, it seems to be something that always seems to fit their personality. Would it be something like that where it's not like something you visually see, but it's kind of something that it's more of like a sense almost?
It could be related. That could have to do with synesthesia. Yeah. You know, I can't say for sure, but I think so. I think so. Like, I believe too that the reason why humanity only expresses synesthesia in rare cases nowadays, and oftentimes children have it and lose it as they age, I believe that has to do with the social programming and the materialist philosophy and the constant separation programming that's put out. So, you know, we have philosophy out there that will tell you can't even trust your senses. Like, you get into a conversation, philosophy conversation with some people, and they'll be like, yeah, but how do I know that the green that you see is the same as the green that I see? Maybe we see it differently, but because it's always consistent, we both think we're talking about the same thing, you know, but there is no objective reality.
There's a Twilight Zone episode about that with the plane. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, where there's like 4 guys standing in the hangar in an old Twilight Zone episode. And they're like, oh, I see this color for the plane. The person's like, no, I don't see that. I see this. But I see that now because you were the one that mentioned it. And now that's what my perspective is of that because of somebody else mentioning it.
Yeah, that sounds very Twilight Zone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but okay, so I think that these philosophies that postulate that there is no objective reality and that your senses are... that you don't see the world, but you see the image of the world projected into your head. I think that is wrong because of synesthesia. I think synesthesia proves why that's wrong. And what I mean by that is with synesthesia, you seem to be tapping into seeing more of the truth of nature and reality, that everything is connected and correlated. I think that probably humans had this more commonly or all the time, and that's why the ancients were able to create and preserve and pass down systems of occult correspondence that seem to have magical power to them when applied, right?
Mhm.
That tones have colors, have a shape associated, and there's a tree associated, and this septenary pattern is repeating over and over again throughout nature, replete. So I think that what we've done in our materialist philosophies and society that preaches and enforces division is that we've also split our 5 basic senses. I think there's probably more senses than that available to us into separate entities. Kind of like those people that whenever you go out to Easter dinner, I was thinking of my brother-in-law right now. They got 5 things on their plate and they eat them one at a time and they don't let them touch. I like to mix up the food and taste all the flavors at once. But so I think that because it's possible for some people to see the color of a number, that means that that's actually there, because different people who have synesthesia will have the same ability to do that. The pattern will be similar. Maybe not. Maybe for some people, 5s are blue, and for others, 5s are orange. I can't say I know. But the fact that there is this blending of senses possible and that you can train it in yourself to some degree, I think that has to do with whether or not you can see auras as well. That really, our faculties atrophy if they're not used. I think that's probably what happened. And because we've allowed certain faculties to atrophy, it leads to what feels like the material evidence for a cold, dead, inert, universe of lifelessness. But that if we could retrain our ability to perceive subtle energy, we would recognize the life in everything more evidently. I have some experience with seeing auras. Sometimes they appear to me, and then there was a time in my life where I was doing a lot of practices to try to help myself see them, and I could pretty adeptly and readily see my own, but it didn't so much come out as color for me. It was like almost like this ghost image of kind of like the wavy heat atmosphere off of a highway. That I could kind of see that.
That's
And
how
that
I've
had
heard
to
a
do
lot of
with
people describe it.
Yeah, and that kind of had to do with some qigong practices I was heavily doing at the time. So I know that it's possible to retrain those abilities. And so what is important to me about this that I've been really rambling, I want to roundabout to this is that what we think we're doing with our senses is we tend to think that your eyeballs are picking up this information and putting it into your brain, and your brain's generating an image. And then the world is in the world that you see is not really the real world. That there's some division between the real world out there and your mental projection of it. But what I think is that the world has always been in your mind the whole time. That there's not this mechanism of transfer of information from an out there to an in here. It's always just been in here, right? That even your body is in your mind, not the world and your body. It's all within consciousness. Consciousness is the container.
I mean, as far as for me, what got me into spirituality and when this whole kind of thing started for me was as a kid. I don't know if you've heard me on Mark's podcast, but I used to do astral projections as a kid where I would leave my body and I'd see myself sleeping. And I told him nothing like crazy happened or anything like that. But the weirdest thing I saw one time was best way to describe it is like the blackness of space with like a purple nebula or galaxy. And you're just kind of in it, and you're not really floating, but you're not really standing on anything either. You're just kind of existing within it. So going forward a little bit, this, like I said, when I started having those astral projection type dreams is when I started associating people with colors, not like visually seeing anybody in a way. It would just more be like I would remember that person and I would associate them with a color. So that's when I got the whole concept of like auras as a small child without even realizing exactly what I was doing. Um, but as it's progressed, I've started to believe in that more and more. Just because I recently had a dream, kind of a sad story, but it gets ends with a happy ending. But my current girlfriend that I'm with right now, we were trying to have a second kid, and she ended up having a miscarriage. We went through a hard time, and I had this weird dream where I went back to that same nebula type galaxy place, and I saw a kid that looked like me that pretty much said, "That vessel wasn't a good one. I'll see you on the next one." And that was the end of the dream. So I was weirded out by the fact that I had this same place that I saw twice. So here comes a couple months later, she ends up getting pregnant again, ends up having a boy. So that was another kind of a weird connection there. So I'm waiting until he gets to about the age of the kid in the dream, which I'd say was like 7 or so roughly. And then I'm going to assess it from there. But I don't know. I've always had this big connection with spirituality as far as that goes, and this is a topic that I don't normally get to talk to a lot of people about, especially the aura thing. The only person I've really ever told about that was my girlfriend up until now. But going kind of back what you said, I feel like there's a connection to all these things, and it's almost like something that you have to like work out like a muscle, otherwise you lose the ability. Almost like a dream that if you don't use it continuously, it just kind of fades away and you forget about it. Um, because that even like gut feeling and stuff, it's almost like an extra sense that we have that we don't pay attention to know that we have, where you meet somebody for the first time and you get a bad feeling from them. I feel like that's you reading somebody's aura without realizing that you're reading somebody's aura, and it's like a gut feeling that you kind of push off to the side because it's something that you kind of learn to ignore as you've gotten older through life.
Yeah, your body always knows whether or not you have a mental framework for conceptualizing how or why your body knows right away. I'd like to do more research into stuff like kinesiology and reflexology, where there are technologies and techniques that are able to question the body about things, and the body will have information that it's like and it's verifiable. Like, how would body get that right? I think it works mostly on a yes or no type of binary, but very cool about your story with the dream, and congrats on the successful second child. I would definitely want to ask him about that, maybe even earlier. Like, do you remember, having the chance to come down here and join us for life, but deciding to hold up and wait for the next round? That's because he might remember when he can talk, but
that was honestly something I was going to ask him too as soon as he could talk, because they say kids will remember some memories from past lives, like that one girl who knew the full vivid story of Anne Frank, knew where she hid, all that kind of stuff, and then the memory faded away.
I don't believe that one. I think that's propaganda, but it is true. It's way more prominent in the East, like in India. Kids will tell you where they lived and go meet their old family and shit. I think that so it's really important and healthy maybe to, instead of just ignoring that aspect whenever the kid's growing up and whenever they're first learning to talk, asking them questions about it that might help them experience the recall. It might help them hold on to that connection to and that comfort from not being afraid of death, because knowing it's not really the end of you. They might not ever get that same level of being afraid of dying that a lot of Western people get due to having no conceptualization of their own infinity.
Maybe that's
I'll
part
also
of the
love
problem.
that we're having spontaneous astral projection. That's only happened to me a few times, where I lifted out of my body and could like see my body and was floating around the ceiling fan. I know what that's like a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say it was kind of weird too. It was never anything that I was able to control at any point in my life. It was kind of like I would go to sleep, wake up, and I would see myself sleeping there. And it continued on to when I was a teenager. And going back to like what you were saying about certain energies and stuff too, I went through like a bad patch as a teenager. And when I started going through that, I would still leave my body, but I always had this like weird sense of something like dark, like watching around me, and I'd see like moving shadows and stuff. So then that also kind of linked into like the spiritual world. And I've always wondered too if it's almost like my subconscious within itself, or if it's actually something that's outside of my subconscious. And I'm just like projecting it into like my actual world in a sense.
I always just go with the axiom that all is self. So even when it feels like it's this external demon, that it has to do with some unhealed fission fracture between yourself and a particular aspect of archetype within your psyche. That's how I look at it. So you're going through a hard time, you know, you're not feeling yourself that good, then some part of yourself that is crying out for help or attention can come to you in the form of the external world or even the spiritual world as a demonic reflection, because really what it's trying to get you to do is pay attention to something and notice it. I believe that all archetypes, whether they manifest in a light or shadow, are in service to our imperial higher self.
Have you ever personally had sleep paralysis after you astral projected? Because I always had a weird experience where almost every time I did it, I would come back and I would get sleep paralysis. And that was another reason that I started believing in a consciousness inside of a vessel, because it's almost like downloading back into your vessel, like starting up a computer. It has a slow startup and it has to kick back in before it's good to go and running fast again, you know?
Yeah, actually that was how I experienced sleep or astral projection, where I could, you know, see consciously fly around outside of my body. Was the first few times I actually got the sleep paralysis part first and would fight it and like, oh no, I gotta move, I gotta wake up. And then after that, there was a point where I realized, like, okay, what happens if I just go with it? I have this feeling of being paralyzed, but also it feels like there's a power plug plugged into the back of my neck, and I can feel this electricity going up and down my spine. What if instead of trying to fight to regain the ability to move and control my body, I just slip into this feeling of electricity and this hum and buzz? It would always have this like to it when it was happening. And that's when I popped out of my body, is when I started going with the flow.
See, I've never actually thought about it from that perspective. I've always had the concept of like trying to wiggle and try to get somebody to shake you next to them. But yeah, I've never actually tried to just sit in it. But I've always heard too that, like, kind of like you were saying, that right after you have sleep paralysis too, you have a lot more control over your dreams. But I've also noticed that when I do try to do that, almost every time I've ever become aware of myself within an actual dream and not like an astral projection is when it seems like the dream like spirals out of control, like where I'll try to control an aspect of it and it'll kind of just be like, fuck you, and go off and do its own thing. Like there was one particular dream that I remember walking into a bathroom and I looked around and said, hey, like this is my bathroom. I'm like, I'm in a dream right now. And then the next thing I knew, the walls fell down and there was like endless space, and I just started flying through that to somewhere, and I never made it to where I was supposed to go because I have this huge fear of like the whole concept of flying through space. Like it was just like the most horrifying dream experience I've ever had in my life. But like what's your interpretation of something like that? Like if people try to control their dreams and it kind of just throws itself into another spiral.
I don't know. You know, I've always wondered about dreaming in particular.
That's when I kind of wondered if it was another source in a sense that like is creating these dreams, be it your subconscious, but something else, that it's like you may be thinking that you're in control, but realistically there's another factor that's there that's actually in control. And the only time that you can be in control is when that other factor allows you to be in control.
Right. I wonder about that. I've actually had that exact same thought, that what if lucid dreams was just whatever part of yourself is giving you dreams, gives you a dream that makes you think that you're in control of the dream.
So it's almost like a reality check, all within the same. Like, all right, so you're kind of figuring it out, but you need to keep following down this path. Like it's almost motivating you to try harder to figure it out. Like there is something that's meant to be figured out there, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't answer that, but I do think that whatever, you know, the thing that's giving you dreams is the subconscious or the unconscious. But that's still you. It's actually a bigger part of you than your conscious mind, because you can only hold so much information in your conscious mind in a particular moment at once. There's a limit to that. But
See, my
way more exists below the surface of that, tiny tip of the iceberg of your conscious mind versus the huge structure underneath. Usually whenever I get lucid in a dream where I realize, oh, it's a dream, I'll just like, whatever I'm doing, I'll just stop what I'm doing. Hey, everybody, see you later. And I'll just fly away. First thing I always do is fly. But honestly, something happened recently, not recently, but in the last couple of years where I don't really have lucid dreams where in the moment I realize I'm dreaming, but in the dreams, I have all these powers that for whatever reason, I don't question. I'll have Spider-Man powers or I can just fly and that just seems normal, even though no one else can.
See, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've noticed for myself that I seem to lucid dream when I leave, like say where I'm falling asleep. If I have a night light on that's in the same direction that I'm looking, I seem to always end up lucid dreaming when there's like a light within my eye zone, even if it's closed. It's almost like leaving a light on, in the back of your mind, which makes it so that you are aware that you are still connected to that reality. Have
That's
you ever had
interesting.
experiences
It
like
kind
that?
of reminds me of how like if you fall asleep somewhere and there's sounds happening, you'll in your dream the same sounds will happen, but there'll be like a dream reason why that's happening. Or like, you go to sleep and like in the middle of the night you need to pee and you have a dream about going to the bathroom, and right when you're about to like let loose in the dream toilet, you wake up and you're like, oh shit, I'm almost about to pee my pants.
Kind of funny how everybody has that same experience too, and it's not something that people typically talk about within a dream, but like you already subconsciously are programmed to alert yourself of things like that even within that dream state.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like my other question too, going into like a bigger consciousness is, I don't know what you think about this, but I've almost wondered if we're all theoretically parts of a bigger consciousness. What if the thing that controls the dreams is the bigger consciousness, and it's almost like a way for it to project things that you need to think about into your head on a subconscious level, and that's where like the all right, fuck you, I'm taking control of the dream, and the allowing of somebody to take control of the dream comes into play.
Yeah. And then if we're a part of that bigger consciousness, then it's us doing it. So it kind of collapses the paradox when you look at it that way.
That's true. I was thinking too, it's almost like, I don't know, like a download of information in a sense. Like it's you,
System updates.
yeah, like your higher self projecting something that you need to know back into yourself so that it's like you can live through this experience, but it's not like directly interfering with the experience. Almost like, the concept of like in a lot of like religions, they say that like angels or whatever, they can't directly interfere, but they can kind of like whisper in your ear to make you do these things on your own, kind of a concept.
Yeah. And I also think that our attention practices, our awareness practices, meditation habit has a lot to do with the quality and experience of our dreams. Also, I think that we can choose what dreams we want to have. I won't say it always works, but I'm not always the best at practicing it. But many times when falling asleep, intended for a certain dream to occur, and I'll get elements of my intention will come forth in the dream. So I wonder if like we're just doing it wrong with the whole idea of I'm just going to shut down like C3PO now and whatever happens, happens. What if instead we have all the ability in the world to use that particular expanse of time and infinity that is the astral? One night could feel like you were there for 3 weeks. What if that is part of how we conquer time and death, in a sense that, okay, we were limited on this side of the coin to a degree by the consistent mechanistic flow of how we perceive time here. But what if we had all the powers in the world on the other side of our consciousness to have as much time as we want doing anything that we want? I've even heard of people like practicing their free throws in their dreams on purpose using lucid dreaming and actually getting better at it in the real world. So, I wonder, like, what's our excuse?
Yeah, I think it's one of those
for limiting ourselves in that side where we have every ability to do it all and as much time as we could ever need to do it.
I think it's one of those things where it's like kind of like we were talking about, where it's like separating yourself from how we're intended to be, where there may have been a plan to that, where, going into like not necessarily like a dark agenda concept, but like, taking power away from you within yourself, that we have this ability to be in this world and we have an ability to be in another world. But because of just the way society is pushed into being nowadays, they don't want you to know that you have that power on your other reality. They want you to see that as just like oh, that's a waste of time that I have to sleep, because they want you to be in this materialistic world so that they can, pretty much just make you another gear in the system, because if you have the ability to live this other life within your life, I feel like there would be a lot less of a motivation to be part of like the everyday workforce or the everyday constructs of society if we were aware of these abilities.
Yeah, man. I think that's definitely part of it. We need to, or there's been an agenda over time to definitely downplay the importance of dreams, in terms of like, oh, get your head out of the clouds. You need to show up for work at 6 a.m., make all those widgets for us.
Because it seems like kids have a lot of these abilities, and then we unintentionally kind of push them away from them by like telling them to grow up and all that kind of stuff. So it almost makes me wonder if, going back to that, like you said, chiseling at the wall and continuing in generations, maybe it isn't something that's supposed to be started like this far in life. Maybe it's something that as we learn and progress, that it's something we're supposed to start with our kids, and we're supposed to work with them at a young age so that they can progress farther. And if we create generations of people that have that concept of thinking, like who knows where we might be in 3 or 4 generations by now, or 3 or 4 generations later, with
I couldn't agree more.
Everybody having those abilities and learning how to use them properly. And maybe that's the Great Awakening. Maybe this is the time for that. It seems like a lot of people are more so into spiritual things. Maybe a couple generations we will be at that point. Or maybe we have to start preaching that word.
I am glad that someone like you has got a couple kids to point in the right direction, and then they'll do a better job with their children. Hopefully, it's usually how it goes. You talked about how you had the experience of your next child coming to you and telling you why they didn't show up in the previous vessel. I once had an experience really intense. It was in a meditation, but I had this like astral meeting in a meditation with a child that was like, hey, what you just decided to do in your life, and it was some decision I'd made recently. The astral child was like, yeah, so if you keep going this way, I'm not going to be able to be your kid this life. Just letting you know. And I was like, whoa, it was really intense. It like actually was super emotional. And I felt like at the time I didn't have any other choices to make. So I was confused about what I could have done differently, but you can always do things differently. And I wouldn't say that means I'll never have children, but who knows? Hopefully what I do now helps people who do have children and in that sense, I kind of have a positive influence on the direction that future generations are going.
I can tell you this right now. Half the reason that I started my podcast was almost so that I could make a chronicle for my kids to be open to all of these alternative concepts. So just you being on here right now doing this, you're already going to be speaking to two kids that could further this on. So, even if you don't directly have kids, it's almost like the kids in the sense of a community that you're doing good just by literally being here right now and having this conversation, because
awesome.
You're helping
I'm
my
glad
kids.
You started your show, because I'm really enjoying talking to you, man.
Yeah, and it's been a great time, dude. Thanks for coming on the show with me today, Chance. Would you like to drop all of your info so that people can find you?
Yeah, buddy. It's InnerVersePodcast.com. All my stuff is available through there. I've got a YouTube, but better than that is my Rockfin. I'm also on Odyssey. People can get in touch with me for the sound healing or oracle card spiritual counseling at my email address, chance@InnerVersePodcast.com. There's also our Telegram channel available to everybody who wants to join that community. It's a really, really good community, just full of geniuses and stimulating information and conversations all day, every day.
Is there any new projects in particular that you want anybody to be looking out for? And of course, all of his links will be down at the bottom for anybody that didn't catch those links.
Yeah, I recently completed the narration of an audiobook called Spirit World, July's End. And it's a fascinating exploration of the etymology and mythology around the cult of heliocentrism. And it's by the author Dylan Sicoccio. Amazing book. So if anybody wants to support me and also gain a lot of knowledge, they can check out that audiobook. It's called Spirit World, but world is spelled WHIRLED, like whirl.
I'll also include that link at the bottom too for anybody that needs it.
Nice. Yeah. And there's a link to that on my website as well. And at the show notes and the descriptions for every episode I put out.
Would you like to leave with any words of wisdom?
You're doing a great job out there. I'm so happy that you're even tuning in to this type of information. I think that proves the direction your flow state is taking you, and trust yourself, love yourself, and keep going. And remember that your life actually can be designed in such a way and set boundaries for it in such a way that it feels like fun all the time. You deserve it. You're able to get there, and you will get there if you decide that that's your goal.
Perfect closing notes. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Inquiries of Our Reality. Like always, I'm your host, Shane. See you on the next one, my friends.
If anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, sponsoring the show, has a topic question for the show, or has anything they feel they can contribute to the show, please send me an email at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com. If you'd like to donate to the show so I can eventually do this as a full-time thing, please check me out on Patreon at www.patreon.com/inquiriesofourrealitypodcast. And of course, follow me on social media for updates on the show. For Instagram, it's going to be www.instagram.com/inquiriesofourreality. And for Facebook, it's going to be www.facebook.com/inquiriesofourrealitypodcast.